Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
SciFi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, we're going to talk about the afterlife, especially life in the cloud. I recently have been watching Upload on Amazon Prime, and today I rewatched San Junipero again. It is my favorite episode of Black Mirror out of the entirety of the series, and it's also one of the most heartwarming. So we're going to talk about these two in relation to another one of my favorites, Altered Carbon. These three shows have a lot in common, which is basically life in the cloud, or being able to have an afterlife via some type of digital intervention. So I really love this concept in general, and I love that these shows approach it in very different ways, although they also tend to approach it in similar ways. First up, let's start with Upload. So if you haven't seen Upload yet, it came out May 1st, so we're about a month in. But we've also, for the most part, been in quarantine this entire time, or at least enacting social distancing protocols. So, if you're anything like me, you may have been watching quite a bit of television. If you haven't seen it, you might not want to listen to this entire podcast because there will be spoilers. But I'm going to go ahead and dive in. That was the spoiler warning. So with Upload, it is about a man who dies in the first episode, and he is then uploaded by his girlfriend into the cloud. So it's not quite a comedy. It's more like, I want to say, real life in a way that the characters talk about how the afterlife isn't like real life, but it has enough similarities to feel that way. So not everything is perfect in the show. Not everything is perfect in the afterlife our character finds himself in. And in that way, because it's not perfect, it really does feel like real life. There's a little bit of comedy, a little bit of drama, and also some romance and mystery. This show kind of has it all. Everything but superheroes. If you are wanting superheroes in your cloud-based futuristic concept of the afterlife, might I entice you with Altered Carbon? We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. But first up, Upload. So I like the concept of this show. A lot of folks view it as a comedy, and in some ways, it is kind of a dark comedy, but I don't think that it is entirely a comedy. The show is by Greg Daniels, who was also associated with The Office, and, the guy normally makes TV comedies, but there is a lot more to the show than just that. It is kind of like Black Mirror, but without a lot of the overt darkness. This show actively confronts issues like what an afterlife would really look like in a commercialized setting, such as America. And in that way, it reminds me a lot of The Boys, where we're taking a satirical look at what the future may look like in a capitalistic society. With everything in American life commodified right now, it also makes sense that we would try to extend this even into death. So in this series, our main character is named Nathan Brown. And Nathan dies and is uploaded to a digital afterlife program. So his consciousness is uploaded via someone who works in a call center. And as someone who used to work in a call center, the types of problems that the call center tech Nora has to deal with are in some ways very familiar with needing to have a certain rating maintained and keeping these folks happy, even when they are being unreasonable. So Nathan dies. He's in a car accident in a self-driving car. And his car essentially malfunctions. He tells it to stop, but it doesn't stop, and it doesn't recognize that there's a car illegally parked in the middle of the road in front of him. And so Nathan's car crashes into this, and he's taken into the hospital, where his girlfriend Ingrid shows up, and you can tell that he mostly cares about how hot Ingrid is, and they aren't really talking about a lot of very personal stuff in a way. We've seen him spend a little bit of time with her recently, and he's not really caring about her interactions with his family and stuff, and she's not interested in hanging with his family for the most part. This is a relationship based on sexual attraction. But Ingrid is there for him, and she genuinely does care for him in her own way, as he is being wheeled into the hospital. So once they get there, they let him know that he's dying of a punctured lung and that he can either be uploaded into the cloud or he can take his chances in the operating room. Ingrid convinces him to go ahead and be uploaded, and he's about 27 or so, I want to say is what they said, 26, 27. And so he is highly distressed that he is about to effectively die and be uploaded to the cloud. Although, when you are uploaded, they do freeze your body. Unfortunately, they do not have a way to place your consciousness back into your body yet, so you are essentially being cryogenically frozen to hope that something great happens in the future, which is kind of what happens to Fry in Futurama, but it takes a long time and he is reanimated way, way into the future. Also, very similar in that aspect to Demolition Man and Altered Carbon. But in this case, they don't have a way to go ahead and bring him back yet. This is still an emerging technology. They can take the consciousness out, but putting it back in is a whole nother can of worms. So Nathan is having to make a very serious decision because there's no going back at this point. Life as he knows it will be over. But Nathan was making his own digital afterlife program. He was developing an app with his bro before this. And so he does believe in these things, but he was trying to make a freeware version because he didn't think that this should be that heavily commodified, that everyone should have a right to be uploaded afterwards, and that it should be considered to be a human right and not just a privilege afforded to the wealthy. So Nathan did not have an account with any of these other digital afterlife programs. However, Ingrid, his girlfriend, is super rich. She comes from a really rich family, and so she says that they'll use her account. And they're in such a rush that he agrees to it, and they go ahead and upload him. At which point, we meet Nora. Nora is the person who is working Nathan's case. So she uploads the files into the computer and puts their memories into the correct places, makes sure that everything is working properly and there aren't any data problems like corrupted files or memory files, of which we see that Nathan has a few. So Nora is also responsible for creating his avatar, so how he'll appear to others within the cloud program, and is also referred to as an angel. So an angel is someone who is your customer service / tech support worker in the afterlife. They are not supposed to give you their actual names or tell you whether they are an AI or alive or dead or anything like that. And if you have ever worked at home for any type of tech company, really, that's also one of the things you're not allowed to do. You give them your first name for your safety, of course, and you can give them your employee ID, but you're not supposed to tell them your last name or exchange any information with them or even talk to them about things like whether or not you work from home, because folks have a specific type of reaction to that. They have a connotation in mind of thinking, oh, well, you're not in the workplace, so you're probably not doing a very good job with your work. You're probably not very dedicated to it, and there's no oversight for you. Granted, a lot of that may have changed now, since a lot more folks have worked from home in this pandemic. But prior to the pandemic, when I worked in tech support for 6 years, that was largely the concern, was that customers would get upset if they found out that you were working from home, as though your location invalidated your ability to perform the job. And I had to deal with that on the phones and later on as an operations manager. So whenever the Karens would ask to speak to someone, I was the person that they had to speak to. So I relate a lot to Nora in this show. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to explore the upload of Nathan and what this new future looks like. Stay tuned.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were introducing the concept of the afterlife spent in the clouds with Upload, San Junipero, and also Altered Carbon. And we started with a rundown of what Upload is about. We established that the main character's name is Nathan, and he dies and is uploaded to an afterlife program with the help of his girlfriend Ingrid, and that his caseworker or his tech support / customer service person is named Nora. So in this show, we've gotten to the point where Nathan is in the program. Nora has gotten him to go ahead and think of a couple of different concepts and to visualize his world around him so he can truly get adjusted to his surroundings. And he's one of several people that she's responsible for. We find out later that she has 47 active cases that she is working on, his and the others. So anytime they need anything, she has to go in there. But it's not just Nathan's that she's juggling. She has a high amount of different assignments that she has to deal with. And 47 may seem like a lot. And honestly, I think it likely is. Now, they won't necessarily all need something at the same time, but given that a lot of these folks are new and struggling in this new system, it can be problematic. And they talk about the metrics that they utilize as well, like a 40% rate of these new placements within the afterlife programs just not being able to handle the transition adjustment and ultimately throwing themselves into this data stream that obliterates them. It's the link back to the living world, and some folks think that if they jump into it, they can return to the land of the living, but really it just dissolves their data and pretty much deletes them or corrupts their files. So we know that there's not a way for Nathan to get back, but this Afterlife program does let Nathan and any of the other folks in it go ahead and call or chat with their living friends or their family. They can see what's happening on the living world, get information regarding what's going on in the world around the living with the help of newspapers and all that jazz. So they can still be connected. And there's a lot going on. There are a lot of good things there. They do have in-app purchases. So it is essentially an app. And although he is on the unlimited data plan with Ingrid and her family, they still have those in-app purchases. So if Nathan wants to get something from the mini bar in his room, then it costs a certain amount of money. But if he wants to get the free option, he can also go downstairs to this really dope buffet. But it ends at 10, just like it does in many hotels. And in this case, when it ends, everything disappears. And he meets a new friend named Luke, who's kind of a weird guy. But Luke teaches him a glitch in how to feed himself if he needs to after the buffet just suddenly disappears. And it involves slamming a door about 5 times, and then it will spit out what appears to be perhaps a muffin or some other type of bread. So he's learning how to kind of game the system with Luke, and he's getting to know the folks around him. And he asks Luke, hey, why do we have to eat? Like, why do I feel compelled to eat, even though, this isn't real, none of it matters? And Luke's like, well, that's exactly why the first few people who were uploaded into this type of system, when they were going through the testing phases, just completely lost it. They didn't have to go to the bathroom, they didn't have to eat or anything. And because of that, it was so different from the normal human experience that it really affected them negatively, and they did not make it in the program. So, I thought that was a really interesting concept, and I liked that they addressed that. Similarly, in Altered Carbon, whenever you're uploaded, or you're first spun up, as they refer to it, you are a little bit jarred. They don't want you to look at your new body right then, because you're being placed into a different body than what you're used to looking at. In Upload, you are still getting to see the body that you had before, but it is a digital representation, and it's partly based on whatever photos were supplied to the service workers like Nora at the time. So in this case, Ingrid's grandma is also in this building, and her grandma is about 100 years old, but they used a picture of her from 1961 or so for her avatar, and the photo they used is in black and white. So her avatar is entirely in black and white. You would think that in this type of future, they would be able to recolorize the photo if they so chose to, but this is not really addressed. It does make her character look really interesting, though, and she does stand out from the others. It's also a young photo of her, so there is perhaps a lot of vanity going on in this too. We know that the folks who are in Lakeview, which is the area, the program that Nathan is in, do have socioeconomic status that is quite high up there, or they have someone who works at one of the Digital Afterlife program facilities who is in their family, and they can get on a family plan for it. So it just really depends. The part that Nathan is in is also the unlimited data. At a certain point, we get to see the 2 gig plan and how it's pretty much just white, empty walls and hallways, and the books only have the first 5 pages in them, and you have to purchase it after that. You also have to go ahead and purchase more data, someone from your family does, or you will go ahead and freeze until the next month's billing cycle comes around, if you run out of all of your data before then. So there's nothing to really amuse yourself with or anything like that beyond the in-app purchases. But these folks are getting the 2 gig plan because they can't afford that to begin with. And in that way, it very much mimics modern life in America today. We have truly commodified everything. We pay for the roofs over our heads. We pay for the water that we drink and that we bathe in. We pay for the food that we eat. And folks in many places are not allowed to even grow vegetables or fruit gardens in their yards. You can have trees that are fruit-bearing that are also beautiful, like peach trees and stuff. But in many places, you're not allowed to plow up your garden, or rather plow up your front yard, to turn it into a garden to feed yourself or others. I have seen folks go ahead and dig up their yards and make it super barren. It's a style that you see a lot in the Southwest, so you will just have dirt and sand and stuff, and then plant succulents. And they're okay with that, but they're not okay with you feeding yourself. I have a big problem with that from an ethical and philosophical standpoint, as well as, just a purely socioeconomic standpoint. I grew up way out in the country in the middle of nowhere on a few acres, and we gardened a lot. And that is largely how we fed ourselves for a lot of the year. But we also used it to bargain with the neighbors for other things we didn't have, like cornmeal or milk or butter. So the vegetables and stuff that we grew, we would exchange with neighbors. But that takes money out of the pockets of a lot of folks who really love and embrace capitalism. And so they don't want you to be able to be self-sufficient in any way. And that's why some places in the US have made off-the-grid living illegal too. And we see this manifest in Upload in the form of Nathan's free software, the freeware digital Afterlife program that he was putting forth, perhaps being a motivation for someone to have killed him. Although Nathan at first thinks that he just died in an accident, even though self-driving cars in this future never crash or have these types of failures. He was in one, and he was ready to accept that rather than accept that he was murdered. But his neighbor is David Choke, who is a representation of the Koch brothers within the U.S. capitalist system. And although he makes friends with Mr. Choke, he is also recognizing that Mr. Choke is not necessarily a great dude, but he is his neighbor across the hall in this strange new afterlife he finds himself in. We are going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk some more about how art imitates life in this capitalist afterlife. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing the concept of Upload's premise for capitalism within the afterlife, including these in-app purchases the differences between unlimited data and the 2 gig plan in the Afterlife, and how it is just really art imitating life to a slightly satirical extreme. But in this case, the satire feels incredibly believable. It's almost a Poe's Law type of thing, in which you see something on the internet and it's too difficult to tell the difference between whether it's satire or whether it's truth at this point. It is becoming more and more difficult as time goes on, especially in the wildness of 2020 and in the emergence of new technologies to distinguish between satire and reality. And I like that this show takes that approach. Some folks don't like that. They feel that the show has difficulty finding its tone, but I feel like it very strongly resembles real life. Real life does not have a single genre. It does not have a single tone. And in that way, I really enjoy the realness, honestly, of Upload. So we see that these folks have this server space that they're paying for in these Afterlife programs. And these worlds are created by mega corporations. They are, to the extent, a capitalist mega corporation that they have partnerships with these different companies like Taco Bell and such to go ahead and have their customer service folks like Nora go and pitch these ads to the people who are their clients, more or less. These people they're taking care of as their angels. So Nora has to stand there and deliver at least 10 of these Taco Bell wrap commercials to her clients per day. So she has 47 of them, but she has to provide 10 in a single day. And that is very much what working in customer service and tech support is like. You are required in many cases to pitch something. So don't get mad at your tech support or your customer service guys when you get to the end of the conversation with them and you've been frustrated already, and they still ask you if you would like to pay for premium computer support, even though you are calling them for internet tech support. Computer support and internet support are 2 very different things, and a lot of them are required to pitch that. Their quality assurance folks sit there and listen to it to make sure that they pitch all of them, and they get metrics that they are graded on based on that. So they're required to go ahead and get that done, and if they don't, then they get in trouble for it during their performance reviews. And we see that really happening in this show as well. There are certain things that Nora has to do, and she has to also get these customer satisfaction ratings, where they're rating you 5 stars is what your goal is. And when I was working in tech support, we had those too. They're called CSAT surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, and you wanted all 5s. We called those firewall 5s because it was just 5s across the board. So you did your best in all of the categories. Try to support your favorite tech support customer service interactions, you guys. If you have a really great experience with tech support, or even just a good experience, it is good to give those folks those 5 stars, because a lot of times you just get the angry folks leaving the reviews. It's a lot like Yelp in that way. And we see this happen to Nora's friend and office mate too. So she has to deal with Luke, who is ridiculous and is going through and just causing all kinds of trouble. He likes to try to hack the system, and it causes her a huge amount of headaches. He also will give her lower ratings, and it messes with her CSATs, or just her overall job rating out of 5 stars. And they require things like 4.6 stars minimum in order to qualify for those family plans for Afterlife programs. So they have to hit a certain amount of stars to be eligible for company benefits. They have to be getting certain rankings in their metrics to be eligible for company benefits. And that is the most capitalist thing I have ever heard, and it is very true to call center life. The show is largely, in my opinion, about capitalism and the commodification of everything in life, to the point that we also even learn how to commodify death. We learn how to still get money out of people even after they die. And we already do that in many ways, including with funeral planning. These cultural performances that we have in the US are partly meant to help with the grieving process, yes, but they've also been largely commodified with these vastly expensive headstones and these vastly expensive and really highly polished caskets or urns, how much it costs to cremate someone, and so on and so forth. There's a lot that goes into it. In Appalachia, where I'm from, in a lot of places, they still participate in burying their family members themselves. So they will dig the graves themselves for their family members, and that is part of their grieving process. Granted, not everyone in Appalachia does that. That's just an old tradition that is still observed in many places in the mountains. So the family comes together and they dig the grave, and it's a proactive action that really helps them with the grieving process and coming to terms. Just like in many other cultures where the family helps to prepare the body for the funeral rather than just calling a mortician or a morgue to come and pick up the body and handle it for them. I'm not saying that either way is right or wrong, but the things that happen afterwards do bother me. I've been to over 30 funerals in my life and missed a great many more. And in those funerals, I found that a lot of them are really cookie cutter. It is the same scriptures. It's the same hymns that are sung. It is the same sentiments that are expressed. And folks just saying, my condolences, because they don't know what else to say. And it's really interesting to me that we assign so much meaning to this, but without making many real personal changes to the process. It's very strange to me in that manner, and perhaps that's just a me problem, and I'm focusing too much on the money and those types of processes. But it does seem very strange and very impersonal in many ways, and still very personal in other ways. It largely may be a me problem, but I like that they really talk about this in this show as well. So Nathan, even though he's been uploaded and is technically dead, he still gets a funeral. And the show takes it to an extreme, and it's not really played for laughs. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about this commodification of funerals in real life and the representation in Upload. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the commodification of the afterlife in Upload and how it mimics that of real life. How we spend thousands upon thousands of dollars in digging these holes and having bodies pumped really full of chemicals and placed in the ground, or cremated and placed into an urn, or having these really expensive caskets then just buried. It's very capitalistic, and it's also very commonplace in American culture. And we see something similar happen with Nathan in Upload. But since he's been uploaded and he can interact with folks in the real world still via these view screens, Nathan gets to be at his own funeral and talk to folks and see who shows up and who doesn't, and who really cares and who doesn't. And he also sees that Ingrid gets so involved in the planning of it that she's treating it almost like a bridezilla would a wedding. It's not really about him, the person that it's supposed to honor. It ends up being about her. But that's really what funerals are. They're there to help the people who are still living cope with the loss. Funerals are not for the dead. They are for the living. And that's something that Nathan doesn't quite understand, since he's dead technically, but his consciousness is still there. And as Nora states it, that means he's not a ghost. He is real. And she refers to Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." So this is another philosophical premise that the show attempts to discuss. So he is still there, and in that way, he is almost like the living. But for everyone else, they also feel that they've lost him. They can't really corporeally touch him anymore, even if they can still have conversations with him. And so Nathan is kind of in a limbo in that manner. And he is also having to watch this really weird funeral where there are lots of people attending that he didn't expect would attend, like a bunch of ex-girlfriends and his landlord, and then the folks that he had hoped would attend, like his best bro and some of his other friends, don't even bother to show up, or they leave early to go to a Rams game that is on the same day. It is also a huge buffet style type thing. So there's a ton of different hors d'oeuvres. And at the end of the funeral, everyone gets L'Oreal gift bags. So it's a very specific type of gift bag. It's definitely capitalistic, and it is commodified. I've seen gift bags sometimes, or party favors at weddings, or baby showers, birthday parties, things like that. Never have I ever seen one at any of the many funerals I've been to. But even though that seems somewhat satirical to me, I can totally see that happening. It makes sense with who Ingrid is as a character, and it also makes sense in this satirical future of taking capitalism to the extreme. But it also is just mirroring what we already do in real life. The concept of charging all of this money to preserve human bodies that you then lock in a box and then bury underground in this casket that costs so much money and is meant to help preserve the body in many ways. And then a tombstone also to market. And how much money all of this costs. You have people going into debt, $10,000 or more, when it comes to the burial or cremation of a loved one. Cremation tends to be a lot cheaper than burial does, than traditional internment. But it is not that different really from her giving out gift bags. It's just a very strange capitalistic approach to the afterlife, to approaching death and in dealing with it. It is all about these mega corporations. And the mega corporations in this show also remind me a lot of those in Demolition Man. In Demolition Man, Sylvester Stallone's character is a cop who is resurrected after several years, several decades really, because he took the word of a criminal and thought that the hostages were out of the building, and he ended up causing the deaths of a lot of hostages while apprehending this madman. And so they were both placed on ice, more or less. They were cryogenically frozen. And then when the villain escapes, then Sylvester Stallone's character also does. So he's resurrected to be chasing after Wesley Snipes' character. And Sandra Bullock's character is also supposed to be one of the good guys, and she says she's going to take him out to Pizza Hut for dinner. And so he's like, well, what the heck? Why are you taking me to Pizza Hut? Like, I like pizza, but that's a weird choice. And she goes, oh no, during the franchise wars, Pizza Hut won, and now all franchises are Pizza Hut. Now all restaurants are Pizza Hut. And he's like, what? So they go out to a very nice dinner, but the restaurant is just named Pizza Hut, just like anything else would be. And in Upload, we see this in the concept of trying to bring the consciousness back to a cryogenically frozen body. And the company that does this is Oscar Mayer Intel. I really love the visualization that comes from Oscar Mayer sandwich meats being merged with Intel processors for computers. It makes a lot of sense. It's like a meat CPU. It's part gross and part hilarious in the way that they put that together. They could have selected pretty much any other franchise for it, but they specifically chose this Dr. Frankenstein style concept of it, where it is a meat CPU. That's really what I think of every time I see it. And I did bark out a laugh when it popped up on the screen. They do a lot of other merges like that in Upload, and every time you can tell that it is wholly intentional. Even Taco Bell isn't just Taco Bell in this show. I forget specifically what it is combined with, but it's more than just one. A lot of these are these mega corporations now. And that also makes me think of other types of sci-fi series like Dark Matter, and how in Dark Matter, the future is based on corporations, like 3 really big corporations who are going to war with each other, essentially. And that's how everyone's lives are ran. It's not these big centralized governments or anything like you see in Star Wars, or these big groups based on the planets and their inhabitants, like you see in the Federation with Star Trek, where you have the humans and the Klingons and the Ferengi and the Cardassians and the Romulans and the Vulcans and the Andorians. So you have these groups that are based on the individual species and such that they come from, or the planetary systems that they come from. But here in Upload, it's split among socioeconomic status, whereas in Dark Matter, this future is also split into socioeconomic status, but largely along the lines of megacorporations. And the existence of these megacorporations and how they control everything is really that mandorla of the Venn diagram of Demolition Man, and also of Upload and of Dark Matter. Everything is highly processed and targeted in the ads and everything in these shows. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about Upload and these targeted ads. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast. takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the commodification of death and also how it really looks like a mega corporation world in this future, just like in Dark Matter and Demolition Man, and also like in Altered Carbon. So in the world of upload, you also have these ads beyond the ones that are read to you by your angel. The ones read to you by your angel are more of these live read ads where you are having to have them delivered by an individual, like who is having a conversation with you. But in the case of these others, like Orbit Gum, the Orbit Gum ad will actually follow you around as a man holding a box of Orbit Gum and asking if you would like to purchase some. And then the money is transferred over your head from you to them in a manner that reminds me a little bit of the Sims symbol being over top of your Sim's head. So there's that type of ad, and then there's also just the type that just pops up into the air. And you also see those types of pop-ups in Altered Carbon. When we see Takeshi Kovacs first come down to the planet in season 1 of Altered Carbon, he is just bombarded with all of these ads everywhere he looks until he's able to acquire like an ad blocker program that helps to get rid of that. But you either have to purchase the ad blocker or obtain it by some other means. So you are essentially hacking the system. And really, our lives right now are full of ads. You can't drive your car down the road without seeing ads on billboards. You can't open up your phone and play a game or use another app or use your browser on your phone or your computer or your tablet without seeing ads pop up. They're on Facebook. They're on news websites as well. Everything is just always in your face with these ads. You're being bombarded with them, whether they're ads for the next news article or you're getting targeted ads based on your purchases on other websites, because so many of these businesses own each other too. So Amazon owns Twitch, and you also have Facebook and Instagram being owned by the same groups. And a lot of them end up using your data to try to help target ads for you, as though they're doing you a favor. And I'm not saying any of these specific companies are specifically and individually at fault for this. This is a very widespread issue within the United States and across the globe. But these ads are targeted to you, and they're like, oh, we want to make sure that we are targeting this ad experience for you. But it's not really for you. Why do they want to target this ad experience? So that they can convince you to buy more things. They want you to see things that you want to buy. But if you have to be shown these things in order to buy them, do you really need them? No. And so it's not about helping you. It's about capitalism. It's about making sure that you keep spending your money and giving them that money. They get the money for the ad revenue, and if they're the ones who sell those items, they also get the money for that. It is truly a capitalist carousel. It just keeps going round and round, y'all. But that is the nature of life as we see it here, and it's also the nature of life in Upload, or the Afterlife, honestly. For folks like Takeshi Kovacs and Altered Carbon, if you have been spun up, you're going to see these everywhere. and it's going to truly plague you unless you can stop them from popping up. And you get graphic pop-ups in there as well. So he's seeing these sexual pop-ups or ads popping up. He's also seeing ads for hotels and ads for literally anything and everything. Capitalism is everywhere, whether that's on our computer screens that we more or less live in right now. You go to work and you spend time with the bad screen, and then you go home and you get to sit down in front of the good screen. But there's ads everywhere. Any type of streaming service has ads, not necessarily for other programs or for other companies, but for other TV shows or movies that are present on that same platform. And a lot of them are making their own content now too. So they're not just in partnership with others to show others content, but they're showing their own, and they're prioritizing their own in the ads they're displaying to you. So even though you're like, yes, I do want something else to watch, it's really just more money in their pockets. Don't get me wrong. I love social media and television and movies just as much as the next guy. Indeed, that is why I'm sitting here talking to you about these TV shows and these movies right now. But it is also something I think it's important to discuss as time goes on. There are alternatives to these very expensive ways of dealing with death. There are alternatives to having to just be bombarded with capitalism all the time. And this show really asks the question of how far is too far? And it does it from more of a comedic perspective for the most part. The things like the ads are generally played for laughs, but it's a very salient point. How far is too far? Is doing this in the afterlife truly too far? I also like how Upload and Altered Carbon shared this concept of there being an ethics issue in the afterlife. How this being able to upload your consciousness into the cloud should be a human right and not one that's predicated upon socioeconomic access. And there are different levels in this too. In Upload, we see that even though Ingrid's family is rich, they're not incredibly rich, like not compared to the likes of Mr. Choke. And even though Mr. Choke and Nathan are on the same floor and they're across from each other and are neighbors in this grand hotel of Lakeview, they have very different, very different accommodations. Beyond the doors, Nathan's really just looks like a hotel room and stuff. But beyond the door of Mr. Choke's, he has several acres and a mansion and all of this other stuff because he's paying for this unlimited data and all of these extras because he's worth billions of dollars. Perhaps trillions. I cannot quite recall. I think he said it with a B, but I'm not sure. So he's always just living this lavish life. And then you have other folks who are like Nathan, and it's a good life, Nathan and Luke and Dylan and everyone, but they also have folks living that 2-gig life too. So there is an ethical component in this because there are some folks who can't afford it at all. And we also have folks like Nora's dad who don't think it's right to be uploaded, like the group led by Kel Chris Falconer. And Cal does not think that folks should be uploaded, even though we find out a little bit more in the following seasons how she's related to the creation of the technology to begin with. There are folks who are wanting to use it for socioeconomic issues. There are folks using this technology to apply it to criminal sentences, just like they did in Demolition Man. And it really is a great intersection, the TV show Upload, of many of these different shows. I am really enjoying that aspect of it, where it has so many different tones overlapping that you're able to feel like, oh wow, this actually feels pretty real and true to life. We are going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the ethics of the afterlife in Upload, San Junipero, and Altered Carbon. Stay tuned.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing how different folks feel about the human rights aspect of being able to upload yourself into a cloud, how issues like socioeconomics play into these concepts, as well as ethics and philosophy. And that's really what we're going to focus on now. So San Junipero is the episode of Black Mirror, Season 3, Episode 4, that's largely heartwarming. In San Junipero, you see these two women meet in this 1980s setting online and fall in love. They're part of a cloud. Then we find out that they're both actually a lot older than they appear to be in the cloud version, and that they're both in their end-of-life stages in senior assisted living facilities for folks who have medical issues. And I really enjoy how the character of Kelly puts that to the nurse who is taking care of Yorkie and says to him, you know, they ration out our access to this cloud of only allowing us 5 hours per week on Fridays and stuff. And he's like, well, you know, it's just to help prevent any dissociations from the real world and people preferring to be in the cloud. And she's like that doesn't already happen in senior facilities. And that is a really great point. So they're trying to prevent folks from just wanting to be uploaded in the cloud all the time. But if you have these limitations in regards to what you are physically able to do and what you are allowed to do and who actually comes to see you, then you might make some very different choices. But we see that Kelly doesn't think she wants to join the cloud, whereas Yorkie definitely does. We also see characters like Takeshi Kovacs and Kel Christ-Falconer believing that folks abuse this and that it's not natural and it shouldn't occur. But you also see other folks in Altered Carbon who are very human, even in their computer-like states. So you have Poe, who is almost more human than many of the folks who have been around for a while, the Meths. So they're older than Methuselah, as that reference. And you see that humanity has a very different meaning when you're applying it to this cloud concept or to the concept of living forever. As Miguel de Unamuno would put it, it's precious life that is, and love and things like friendship, because they tend to be fleeting. That is the tragic sense of life, is knowing that we're all going to one day die. But in a world where you know that you're not actually going to die, that you've been uploaded into a cloud for eternity, it can really change your approach with life. And we see that with the meths, how they become just extensively cruel and callous, and they're going to live forever, so they don't really care about the people who are starving in the streets. And you see people like Nora's dad who are really religious, and they worry that if they upload, they won't get to be in the same afterlife as their partner who died before and either were unable to upload or had chosen not to. And that's also Kelly's perspective. Kelly doesn't necessarily believe in the afterlife or heaven, but she does believe that her husband, who she was with for 49 years, won't be there, and neither will their daughter, who died tragically young. And her husband's reason for not uploading is because he didn't want to be without their daughter. But she doesn't believe the same thing as him. She doesn't believe in that concept of heaven. And so ultimately, Kelly decides to be in this new kind of afterlife with Yorkie. I think it's really beautiful. And Yorkie also brings up a good point when she's trying to convince Kelly. And she says that in this concept of San Junipero, they're able to delete themselves at any point. So nothing is permanent. If they decide they want to go at some point, they really can. In Altered Carbon, we also have this concept of real death, but most folks will not choose real death for themselves. Indeed, even sleeve death, the death of the body that your consciousness is riding around in, can be very jarring when you're put into a new body. And folks tend to only willingly do that if they are part of some military group, like Takeshi Kovacs and Kel and the others were, or if they're doing it for socioeconomic reasons, like the husband and wife who go around beating each other to death, fighting each other to death for the amusement of these incredibly rich meths in order to get an upgrade for their current sleeve. That's how they provide for their children. And it's a form of just entertainment, really. But unlike wrestling, it really is people harming each other and dying. Granted, their consciousness is still there, but they're having to go home in a different sleeve to their kids repeatedly. And that has to have some effect on the kids. Granted, we can get used to anything as humans, and anything that we become used to can just become our new normal. So perhaps Takeshi's concerns about the children are unfounded, and it's not that strange. But then again, it could be. Who knows? I would feel really weird, I think, if I never knew if the person coming into the house was actually my parent. Is there like a safe word? Like when you have somebody else pick your kid up from school? How do you even navigate that? Granted, I have grown up in a world that was not like that, so perhaps that is one reason why it is too difficult for me to fathom in a comfortable manner. But it brings up some excellent ethical questions. Like, if you were able to choose, would you? What might stop you? Would you choose to maybe get rid of your body at some point? Or do you think that people really would become almost megalomaniacs, and in knowing that they would live forever and being able to amass wealth over the centuries just end up being corrupted? Because absolute power corrupts absolutely. With the case of upload, your loved ones can also delete you. So in San Junipero, it's very much played to be this empowering thing where you can delete yourself if you want. In Altered Carbon, real death is something that is violent and shocking and one of their highest crimes. But in Upload, Ingrid just casually threatens to delete Nathan at his funeral when he expresses being upset that no one has really made his funeral about him. And she has, in her mind, worked really hard on this party and is upset that he seems unappreciative and ungrateful. And he ends up having to back down and being like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm being ungrateful. He's not technically in the wrong. His funeral should be about him. If you're able to still be there and witness it, it's supposed to generally be a celebration of that person's life and a mourning of them. It's people getting together in remembrance of someone that they all knew and ostensibly cared about in some way or another. And so I understand why that concept would be difficult for Nathan. But again, funerals are really for the living, but they are supposed to be about the dead. So it's a really interesting quandary that it puts us in considering this show. And I like that the 3 different shows, Upload, San Junipero, and Altered Carbon, take such different approaches to death. One is empowering, one is tragic, and another just creates more of a power dynamic with the purse strings. It's a capitalist power dynamic since Nathan is being housed in this cloud on Ingrid's dime, and he has to talk to her before he can pay for any additional things that he wants, even though he has his own money. Hers is on file, and she wants to be checked with before he spends money on anything. He's completely financially dependent upon her, even in the afterlife, and up to the point that she has all of the power in the relationship and could literally kill him. She could give him a real death, as Altered Carbon would put it, if she just gets mad at him or if they break up. And that causes a lot of other problems in this capitalist satirical future that doesn't look all that different from financial abuse in modern day America. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.